Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Sight and Sound Video History Project of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. I'm Tom Walton. Generations of Toledoans have enjoyed the annual production of the Nutcracker during the Christmas season, and it is the most visible and certainly the most popular contribution to our community by the Toledo Ballet Association. And today we sit down with the lady who founded the TBA and established this wonderful holiday tradition. She is Toledo's doyen of dance. She is Madame Marie Vogt. And Ms. Vogt, it's a delight to have this time with you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Given your marvelous career in dance and ballet, a lot of people might assume that you came here from somewhere else, but you are a Toledo girl through and through, born here in the 1920s. Can you tell us a little bit about the neighborhood where you grew up?
The neighborhood where I grew up involved my grade school at Whittier School, DeVilbiss High School, and my mother was from Wichita, Kansas, and she and my father settled in a home on Overland Parkway, and it was near a library, which I visited as I grew up, and went to school at DeVilbiss High School. Yes.
Your parents were special people in your life. You mentioned them, but I want to talk a little bit more about your father, Herman Balanchine. He was a physician, is that right?
Yes, an internist and a very jovial man. Yes.
Any other special memories of him as you were a child? Were you thinking at all about a career in medicine because of your father's influence?
No, I wasn't. I'm not sure that he approved of my career in dance until the very end of his life. I think he was proud of what I had done.
Now your mother, her name was Fanny, is that right?
Fanny Jeanette Millhopt,
exactly.
French-Swiss.
Now she loved acting, and she taught speech and drama, and she even performed one-woman theatrical performances of what, entire Shakespeare plays?
Well, she was a Zeus, I believe they called that in those days, and she would give performances of Shakespeare plays, memorizing the entire play by herself before grateful audiences.
That must have impressed you.
Well, it did, and her love of books was what really impressed me. She would say, "You're never alone when you have a book," which is true.
Marie, as you look back, was it your mother then who inspired you to a career in performing arts?
Absolutely, she did, and with her love of books especially, and she believed that she wanted her children to be exposed to the arts and to nature. We took many long walks in the woods with an apple in our pockets, pretending we were lost, you know. And then she took us to the museum when young children weren't usually taken to the museum for concerts by Mary Van Doren in the little auditorium. She got special permission. I think I was 5 and my sister was 3 when we went to our first performance there.
Children normally didn't attend events of that
nature? Well, not they began to, but not at that age. I think they worried that the children might disrupt the concert or not behave.
Not good form.
But not my mother's children. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. But she loved music and the arts, and eventually I had 8 years of art at the museum, art lessons, and Molly Godwin there saw to it that a small theater, not the size, but a replica of the peristyle was made for me to design costumes and scenery with. And we went to concerts, and I had art, and I had dance. I had scarlet fever and rheumatic fever when I was in the 2nd grade and wasn't able to walk. And when I became well again, I was given dance to strengthen my legs, and that's what happened. I couldn't stop dancing from then on.
Yeah. So now you mentioned your sister Joan. She was 2 years younger than you, your sibling, but she was quite a talented young lady in her own right, wasn't she?
She was a lovely violinist and was in the 2nd violin section of the Toledo Symphony for a number of years. She even danced and choreographed her own dances at DeVilbiss High School.
Now, as siblings often do, were the two of you quite competitive?
It never occurred to me. I had my own life, and my mind was on what I was doing, and I never thought about that at all. And now today, I don't recall that we were competitive.
Very supportive.
At least not on my part.
Yeah. What impact did growing up during the Depression years have on your childhood?
Well, first of all, we were dressed mostly by my relatives. We didn't have a lot of money, you know, in those days, and my relatives would send clothes that they had made to us. And I recall going to one of those little golf, what do they call them, hole-in-one places that they allowed you to play golf. And people behind me were saying, you can tell it's depression because they certainly don't use much material in those girls' dresses. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that you attended Whittier Elementary, of course, and for years, as you say, well, you took writing lessons. Let me list some of these things that I understand you did. You took writing lessons, art lessons, piano lessons.
Yes.
You studied composition and harmony. You enjoyed poetry and writing.
Yeah.
Out of all that, was there an epiphany? Was there a special moment when you knew your future was in dance?
Well, of course, all of those items aided me in what I finally decided dance would be my career. And even today I wonder what would have happened if I'd gone into acting, drama, or what if I had pursued the writing career. But I love dance, and not so much performing, which I did, but choreographing. And if you choreograph, you have to have a ballet company, and they don't come ready-made. You have to develop them. So that's how I started teaching, and I taught when I was a freshman at DeVilbiss High School.
I find that rather amazing. Here you are, what, 13, 14 years old?
13 years old. Mm-hmm.
You're teaching dance, you're teaching ballet already, 6 days a week?
Yes, oh yes. I'd go from the classes at the school, and Mother would drive me down to the, first I taught at the Toledo Conservatory of Music. I had studied piano with Otto Sturmer for 11 years, and I was rather serious about my music, but they asked me to teach one of their pupils in exchange for classes there, and I did. And then an invitation came from the Bach Conservatory on Jefferson Avenue, 2211 Jefferson, near the old Tally Ho, and to teach there. And so I did, and took myself across the street and began teaching at the Bach. And the classes grew. In fact, they grew so that the Bach Conservatory, Mrs. Stone, who was the director and owner, had to build a whole new area on the Bach Conservatory building for my classes. And eventually another studio in the basement to take care of the classes. And I merrily taught, and in addition to the classes at Bach, I had classes at Old Westwood Theater on Sylvania Avenue in the morning on Saturdays. And then Mother would drive me down to the Bach to teach the rest of the day. And then I was invited to teach ballroom at the Ottawa Hills High School, or elementary school, which I did for 19 years.
But when you started teaching, you were, again, just a high school student.
I was just a
How
high
old
school.
were the students you were teaching?
Some of them were older than
I would imagine.
Yes, yes. And an interesting array of students, some of them with parents who were in theater and others not. I remember one mother asking her child to come to her so that she could spank her. And this amazed me that the parents would treat the children that way. But we had an array of children from an array of families all around the Toledo area.
Was it your mother's hope? I read somewhere that she had hoped that you might become a concert pianist.
Yes, she did. I think, well, evidently I was progressing quite well with Otto Sturmer, and her lady friends had warned her that if I were to continue with dance, that I would not be one who would find a suitable husband. Ha ha. I found a most suitable husband.
Yes, you certainly did. I would imagine your mother, though, was pleased with your choice of dance and ballet as it turned out.
Oh, and aided and abetted me, yes.
Now, as you became a young woman, you studied with some great teachers, too, didn't you? The people like Václav Nowicki?
Oh, Novitsky, yes. He came from Russia first and had a home or farm in the Detroit area. And he would come to Toledo twice a week to teach. And many stories were heard about Mr. Novitsky and his farm and his cattle that he tried to get into a truck one day, and they refused to jeter into the trunk, and he would say "jeter dom things," but they did not jeter.
They were not very good students, apparently. And what about Nicholas
Tsoukalas? Nicky was a teacher in Detroit, and I went up on the weekends and had 7 hours of dance training from him. He was a Greek and was known for the pantomime he taught, along with the ballet and the Greek classic dancing, and I enjoyed that very much. And he really introduced me to the classic Spanish dancing and the use of castanets. So eventually, when I took myself to New York and studied at the School of American Ballet, Mr. Balanchine, you know, the director of the New York City Ballet, and that's the home of the company, I eventually not only studied ballet there, but I found myself a wonderful Spanish teacher, and Jose Fernandez, and I studied with him as well as gypsy Spanish teachers, the Cancinos and Lola Bravo and so forth. And eventually, when I was in California, I studied with Rita Hayworth's father, Eduardo Cancino, in the Spanish dance.
Well, they all had a remarkable influence on you, obviously, as a young dancer yourself and a young teacher. You graduated from De Vilbius High School in 1939.
Yes.
I don't want to get too far ahead of our story, but did it sadden you decades later when De Vilbius closed?
Yes, it was very sad. But that was such a wonderful institution. And of course, when I was there, I loved my teachers, but even now I can see how I was very fortunate in the teachers that I had for my classes.
I want to ask you about the years immediately following your graduation from De Vilbius in 1939. You went out on your own at what, 18 years of age, and established your own business, in effect, with your dance school. I would imagine that in pre-World War II America, that took a lot of courage for a young woman, didn't it?
Well, it did. The banks weren't about to give me a loan for my studio, and my husband had to sign for me, you know, and this was infuriating that the woman couldn't have her own loan. But no, it was a big event, but it didn't discourage me, nor did it frighten me. It's something I wanted to do. And when I moved from the Bach Conservatory to Cricket West, the owner of Cricket West said, "Mrs. Vogt, you should have a P," and you do, the initial P in your name. I have Marie Patricia. He said, "Because you have perseverance."
You name it, persistence, perseverance, indeed you did. And 2 years after you graduated from high school, back in 1941, just as America was getting into the war, you launched the production called the Nutcracker, a holiday tradition that continues to this day in Toledo, and clearly huge challenges, and as you've pointed out, did not discourage you at all. You weren't intimidated in any way by undertaking such an ambitious project at such a young age.
Well, I believe I was young and didn't realize what a serious situation it might be. And when I began with the Nutcracker, it was using the music that was available for the performance. We couldn't get, nor did I want to get the music out of Russia for the complete Nutcracker.
I understand it was quite difficult to get the score out of Russia.
So I just choreographed just small pieces, and from there it grew into a large production.
And we'll talk a bit more about Nutcracker in just a little bit, but I want to look at the war years because they were very important in your life. You attended the University of Toledo.
Yes.
What was it like being a young woman in America during that time of Pearl Harbor and Rosie the Riveter and that whole World War II time?
Well, it made you want to get into something that had to do with the war. And when I really went down to the Red Cross to see if I could be a member of the Red Cross during the war, and they said, "Oh, Marie, you better just go back to doing what you were doing and training the dancers." It was a very serious situation. Of course, there at the university, we had the Wolf Hill, where the soldiers held out, the ROTC, and the classes were very much smaller because the boys were gone.
You know, one thing that occurred for you at the University of Toledo, you became involved with an organization called the Peppers. What were the peppers?
Those were high grades, I believe that was the
For
situation.
academic achievers,
Yes.
is that right? Now, you also directed some plays in
Oh, I
college and
directed
starred
the
in some
May
of the
Day
plays.
celebrations, you know.
Did you, and of course with remembering your mother so well, did you think perhaps during those college years doing the plays you might want to be a stage actress?
No, I don't believe. Well, I enjoyed the theater. Moreland Bell was the director of the plays out there, and I was just a freshman when I auditioned for one of the plays, and my goodness, I received the lead role, and I think I had lead roles in about 3 or 4 of his productions. He was a fine director. I don't know where I got well, I got it from my mother, of course, or through my bloodline, but I enjoyed acting very much.
You also wrote for the school newspaper, as I recall,
Yes.
something that intrigues me as well. You were, you loved to write then, didn't you? And you still do. Was journalism ever an option for you?
Not until later years, but I enjoyed writing for the campus collegian, and I believe I received an award for the best editorial during the war years, and I'm trying to think of the award, the name of the award. I don't know that you...
Well, best editorial pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
We could have used you at the Blade, I suspect. I'll have to count journalism's loss as ballet's gain. You graduated from the university in 1945, is that right? And the war was ending, the whole world was opening up to you, and you went on the road. And you touched on this a little bit ago about your study with the teacher, the Spanish dance. What fascinated you about Spain, Spanish dance, flamenco at that time?
I suppose it was the music, and part of it was we had a neighbor who was from Mexico, and he would come to the house, and Mother would invite him, and he would tell us about his life in Mexico, and it just intrigued me, and it became an abiding interest for me. Before I, let me see, what was it? Was from after I graduated, I went to Mexico for a number of months, and Harold Hartley at the Blade and Times gave me an assignment to, he said, write some articles when you, and my goodness, he published the first one on the editorial page of the paper, and I wrote a series of articles from Mexico, and I was unafraid to visit the chiefs of the various departments in Mexico, the chief of the Treasury, Carlos Mejorada, and the chief of Turismo, and Alejandro Buena, who gave me open sesame to Mexico's activities. And I traveled all over and wrote about the Mexico.
And became a devotee of flamenco at that point, and took your show on the road, right? You did a one-woman dance show.
At that point, then I did, when I came home, yes, I did my show with, I was the one-woman dancer, but I had a partner, Phyllis Roskin, the pianist, who accompanied me and also gave a little lecture before each one of my dances about what I was doing. Yes, we went on the road.
I would love to have seen that. I'm a big fan of flamenco myself. Yes. Do you remember some of the great stages or theaters you performed in during those years?
Not so many memories. Our limousine would take us from Phyllis and her husband, and my mother with me, would travel from city to city in limos, and sometimes the laundry hung out on the window to drive from one place to another. But I don't remember too many of those places.
Well, in 1949, a truly momentous event occurred in your life. You were hired to choreograph the show for the Gridiron show, which of course is an annual parody of political events, and it's still held in Toledo to this day. The gentleman who hired you was a man named Ted Vogt, and you mentioned Ted earlier, but you married him that November in 1949, and a fellow you always called my Teddy, and that changed your life, didn't it? You had your soulmate.
Oh, it was a wonderful thing. And of course, when he hired me, he was president of the Bar Association in Toledo, and I remember the first rehearsal with my boys, the lawyers in Toledo, whom I trained in several dances for their gridiron show. Ted was there and watched every movement. And from May 17th, I think it is, till November, he courted me. And the boys all teased him that he was courting me with the expenses of the Bar Association. But we were married in November, yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that you taught at the Bach Conservatory.
Yes.
And as long as we're talking about momentous events, Marie, you established the Toledo Ballet Association a few years later in 1958, I believe. What motivated you to do that?
It was the motivation of the parents. They appreciated what I was doing, and we had many wonderful performances with large groups of dancers, and they thought we ought to be organized, and did so. I think Nate Goodman at that point was the first president of our ballet association, and it grew. And one of the first performances was at the Paramount Theater at 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't know exactly the date, but in those days, the theater held 3,000 people, 3,000 seats, and every seat was taken plus 1,000 more up and down the aisles of the theater. And it was a huge success.
I hope the fire marshal wasn't there that day.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe he wasn't a fan
That's
of
true.
dance, who knows? Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, also about that time, you opened the Toledo Ballet School in the, you touched on this earlier, the Cricket West Shopping Center
Yes.
out near Westgate. It must have been exciting to have your own place.
Oh, when I finally went to Cricket West, it
Yeah.
was exciting, yes. And it was just a small place, you know, and I had, when I signed for the lease, I had them put in a stairway upstairs so we could have a studio upstairs as well as downstairs. And when we rehearsed for the Nutcracker there, with 150 dancers in the performance, I would have to get on a little stairway up to the stairs and look back down at the mirror to see the performers dancing in order to criticize them and critique them.
Mm-hmm. All the while, you mentioned this, you were still producing and staging the Nutcracker at Christmas time, and as you rehearsed there at Cricket West, did you ever imagine, let's go back all the way to 1939 now, when you first produced a somewhat scaled back version of the
Excerpts,
Nutcracker, that here in the new millennium it would still be an annual Christmas tradition in Toledo? Did you imagine such a thing?
Never imagined, just went on my business, but how can anybody imagine all over the country that the Nutcracker helps to pay the bills for so many ballet companies all over this country, from New York to California. Everyone does the Nutcracker at Christmas time. We tried one year to do another ballet, Sleeping Beauty, but it didn't sell the way Nutcracker did. So Nutcracker had to be our staple. And besides, the music is so beautiful and so Christmassy.
And the story is so lovely. What do you think makes the Nutcracker so timeless, so appealing year after year?
Well, it's a story of to me, it's a story of a family at Christmas time. And since we had a breakup in our family, you know, it was very wonderful to have a chance to produce a family at Christmas time enjoying the other children and the festivities.
Mm-hmm. How did you keep Nutcracker fresh year after year? You were, in many cases, I'm sure, seeing the same audiences maybe that had been there a year before and a couple years prior to that. A lot of the same faces. They're getting older a little bit as they come to your annual productions, but how did you retain that freshness? Did you look for ways to change it up a little bit?
Well, when you're in creative work, as you have been, and certainly the artist over at the museum now, Olitsky's work, you know, he took every day as it came and improved on what he had done. I never found it boring to do the Nutcracker because there were always so many ideas I was able to explore.
And at some point, one of those ideas I have some personal involvement with. There was a character in the production called Mother Ginger. Yeah. And several years ago, I had the great privilege and honor to be Mother Ginger in one of your productions. What a fantastic time that was, and enjoyed it.
What a joy it was to have you.
It was indeed. Yeah. Now, Was Mother Ginger in the original production, or is that something that came along later?
Oh no, it's an original, and sometimes it's done with the Mother Ginger person instead of being on a little house under which ginger snaps emerge. The Mother Ginger, him or herself, perform on stilts, and then
Oh my
to
goodness!
me
I'm
it's
glad
very
I didn't
dangerous.
Have to do that.
Yes.
Well, the Nutcracker's been performed locally, of course, in many venues over the years, and you mentioned a few of them: the Old Art Museum Auditorium, the Peristyle, of course, the Rivoli, I think, the Paramount.
We did I danced the Arabian dance in that production at the Rivoli, and as I remember, there was a popcorn machine in the lobby, and as we were dancing, and I was so serious about my Arabian dance, I could hear the popcorn machine popping all the time. Yes, many theaters, the State Theater, as well here.
And the Paramount, did you perform
yes,
at the Paramount as well? And of course now the production is presented at the Stranahan at the Masonic Complex. Since, as you mentioned this, since the Nutcracker pays the bills by and large, you needed a larger hall, right?
Well, we performed, now there's a matter of my conductors. Wolfgang Stresemann was here with the symphony from Germany, and he asked that we collaborate. And we did performances at the Peristyle first with an orchestra. But the first orchestra performance with Mr. Stresemann conducting was done on stage with both the orchestra and the company on stage. The orchestra was situated upstage, which is back, with a blue screen in front of it, and then the dancers in forward of it toward the audience, so that Mr. Stresemann stood on a little stepladder behind the blue screens so he could see the dancers and conducted from that position. And we didn't have much upstage area to dance. So next year, we danced on the stage and the orchestra performed from the pit. And then we went from the Peristyle to the Stranahan because there was a larger house, 2,800 rather than 1,400 in the Peristyle, and more facilities, overhead space, fly space.
And I believe you present, what, 3 productions each year? Three performances.
Yes.
And one of those, I believe, is for children of limited means.
Oh, yes, we did 5 productions in the old days at the Stranahan, and 1 or 2 of them at least, and we still do them, are for the school children, free of charge for the school children.
Marie, as we sit here in 2012, the Nutcracker will be performed this December for the 72nd consecutive year. What a wonderful gift to your hometown. That must fill you with immense pride.
I am so proud of the company, and I'm proud of the audiences that come too, that they know what to look for and they seem to enjoy it. Oh, it gives me great pride. I'm very grateful.
And a very grateful community has rewarded you over the years with its attendance, its affection, its love, and you've received many awards along the way, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Any of those that stand out for you? There's so many.
There were so many, yes.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
You oversaw many other productions as well, not just Nutcracker. You even took your dancers, I read somewhere, to the World's Fair in New York City.
Yes, we did.
Is that right? Can you talk about that?
Yes, we danced at the Chippewa Pavilion, and we danced several dances in that area, and we took the dancers on a bus, and they all made their own red dresses and red babushkas so that we could see them wherever they went. And my husband chaperoned, and people were asked us if we might be a religious group with our little dancers and their but no, we were dancers going to the New York. It was a great experience.
Was that in the 60s? 1965 World's Fair?
I think it was.
I think so, yeah. Marie, at some point over the years, you must have pondered performing on a bigger stage, dancing or working perhaps with the American Ballet or the New York City Ballet. Instead, you stayed true to Toledo. What kept you here?
Well, I suppose I loved my community, and I loved working with the material at hand. And I know there were opportunities to go elsewhere where there might have been more financing, but I just felt that I wanted to bring myself up by my own bootstraps and continue to be a Toledo girl.
Yeah, and that you certainly have done. You talked earlier about some of the teachers that you worked with, some of the greats, dancers and so forth, but you also met and worked with Ted Shawn. And Ted Shawn, of course, considered by many the father of American dance. What was that like for you?
Well, it was very exciting. My first introduction to Shawn was when I was quite young, arranged for me to go to Ann Arbor to see him and his group dance. And I was so impressed, and I had an interview with him backstage, and he invited me to come to Jacob's Pillow in the Berkshires to study. He was opening his classes there to women as well as men. And I was so taken with him that I invited him several times to come to Toledo to lecture. And his photographer, who did beautiful photographs of dancers, also came to lecture. And he was a great friend as well as an artistic inspiration.
Mm-hmm. You brought a number of great artists to Toledo, didn't you, over the years? Can you remember some of them?
Well, there's more recently, it seems, is Evelyn Cisneros from the San Francisco Ballet, and her partner Anthony Rondazzo, handsome gentleman, and certainly Melissa Hayden from New York City Ballet, and Violette Verdi, and we had numerous dancers. Sono Osato was a famous Japanese dancer who came to perform for us and with us. Isn't this strange? I can't remember the names, but so.
Well, there's so many.
And Johnny Creason and Ruth Ann Cosin from the American Ballet Theater. And they were such fun. Johnny and I would go before performances, much before performances, out to Weber's to eat that wonderful fish out there. He was crazy about our Weber's restaurant. And he was very home boy. But he was a great dancer, and Ruth Ann Cosin, his partner, was also.
And I'm sure a lot of those friendships you maintained over the years, they weren't just professional relationships.
I still have many correspondence with letters from famous dancers who have been here. George Zorich, for instance, the Russian dancer, who was so handsome, and I invited him to teach classes at the studio, and there was a women's class, and he was very happy to teach the women's class, and as he stood to say E1, E2, and inhaled, the women practically fainted, you know. They just thought he was wonderful. Yes, we've had many of the so-called famous dancers here.
Now, over the years, you've welcomed many new students to your classes and your school. What did you look for, Marie, in a new young student? What counted for more, natural talent or dedication, desire, a willingness to work hard? What mattered most to you?
If they were able to listen.
Able to listen, yeah.
Yes, and then to take direction. And, of course, musicality was very important, to be able to follow the music. One of the little girls whom I adore to this day found it difficult to remember which foot. And I was at her all the time. And it's a wonder she didn't become upset. But eventually she learned which foot. And she tried. So just trying is the most important thing.
How important was it that a student have what I guess I would call a dancer's body? In other words, lean, lithe, athletic. Was that important?
Well, it's very visually. Of course, it's very important. And those who do not may probably go into other areas of dance therapy, as well as other dance companies. But for a ballet company, you look for certain lines in a dancer's body.
I'm sure it's true. It's fair to say that not all athletes are dancers, but is it fair to say all dancers are athletes of a sort?
Not particularly.
Not necessarily.
No.
They have to take, as you say, good direction.
Yes.
Good teaching,
Good.
as delivered by you, can
Persistence
make
on both parts.
a person willing to work hard, can make them a better dancer.
Yes.
There seems to be so much in ballet that goes beyond dance, Marie. The appreciation for proper conduct, respect for others, and etiquette, of course. Were you teaching good character as well as good technique? In other words, what we would call the graces.
Well, yeah. I believe that was part and parcel of my teaching and the teaching at the ballet school. And not only dedication and good character and attentiveness, persistence, not to become discouraged, of course, but I also thought that our dancers should know more about the other arts, music and art, and more about other dancing. I know I was at the library, our library, day after day when I was a student, reading all the books I could on dance, all kinds of dance. And I don't think there was a book that I hadn't read. And I really would like to see that more in our youngsters today. Maybe the email and the computer has taken the place of the books at the library, but I would like to see that there's more reading done on the part of our...
I think that's a concern we all share, those of us involved with the library, that a younger generation can text with their thumbs,
Yes.
but they're not reading books.
No.
Yeah. Was it difficult to find young boys willing to study ballet?
Oh, it was difficult. I scoured the city from the time when I was just beginning, and somehow was able to come up with men to dance and young men, and find young men who were in construction. Their fathers were in construction business, and that helped in the building of our scenery, you know, as well as in the dance.
I would imagine that in those early years it may have seemed unmanly for a lot of young men to take up ballet.
It may not have been on their part, but certainly for their friends and family that was the perception. But nowadays we have more men and more men in our ballet company, and it's wonderful to see.
Absolutely. And speaking of young males, I understand you even taught wrestlers from the University of Toledo, is that right? Wrestlers about dance and ballet. What was in ballet that benefited?
Well, the Romans, you know, danced and to develop their bodies, and also ice skaters from the ice rink. There was quite a serious ice skating group in those early days, and they would come to me for classes in ballet to strengthen their legs and give them certain movements that they had not learned in their sport.
Okay. Now, it must have been gratifying to you to see your students go on to dancing careers elsewhere. I'm sure you had young ladies, maybe young men, who went on to other ballet companies, larger companies perhaps.
Well, I can think of Betsy Barron, who was a principal in the Royal Ballet Canadien in Canada, who danced with the company, and then when she retired, the government helped to set up an area of therapy for dancers that she was in charge of. She was sponsored by the government, therefore. Yeah. And yes, I have many dancers all over the country and all over the world, as a matter of fact, who are in other fields, but dance has enabled them to do what they do.
And a number of them, I would imagine, also became dance teachers, like yourself.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Yeah. You were a proponent of the George Balanchine style of dance. What does that mean?
Well, Mr. B, first of all, believed music comes first, and I believe that too, having had so many years of music, that the music is the propelling force for the performance of your dance. And his ballet, in his ballet, you see, he wanted dancers to show the audience that they could see the music through dancers.
And that was a style you embraced, obviously, in your teaching here. Yeah. Marie, I want to talk about some of the folks who helped you along the way. You and Ted did not have children of your own, but Your nephew Jack Jones served as business manager of the ballet company and must have seemed like a son in many ways.
Oh, he was the most precious young man, and he's deceased now, you know, and we miss him very much. But he loved, even at a very young age, he said to me one day, "Oh, Didi," he called me Didi, "isn't it too bad we can't hear all the beautiful music that was ever written?" And I thought that was a wonderful thing for a young boy to say. He loved music. He studied violin, and but he loved the dance and was certainly helpful backstage at all of the ballet performances.
And he served as business manager, is that right?
Yes, oh, he was.
Another important figure in your life, and we have to mention Madame Velta Cernanock. She was at your side for years, helping prepare the Nutcracker every year and all of your other wonderful productions. Can you talk about your friendship with Madame Velta?
Well, when she came to town, I think the Methodist Church brought her here from Latvia, although she was in a German camp. And she and her husband, they had escaped both the Russians and the Germans, and were in this camp and were brought to Toledo. And neither one of them could speak English, but I was told of her background and immediately asked her to teach at the ballet school. And although she couldn't speak English, she would count 1, 2, 4, 7, you know, in her little way. She was very charming, and the students adored her. And I also invited her to dance in some of our ballets, certainly the Nutcracker. She was the Snow Queen, and in many other productions. And a very, very good friend.
And she's passed away as well, is that right?
Yes, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, in 2009
Whatever
or
it was,
10?
on June
Okay.
3rd.
Compensation was apparently not a big deal to you over the years. I mean, you may have taken an honorarium or something, but a salary, the production was more important than your pay, is that right?
It was amazing. I was not interested in money, and when I started my school, I must have made a lot of money, but I just brought the money home and Mother put it in the bank. But to me, the production of what I was doing was the most important. And no, I was a freebie there for quite a while, and just a small stipend after a while, but that was not important to me.
I think that's very important for people to understand that you cared so much that you didn't care if you were reimbursed for much of that time.
That's right.
Yeah. In 1995, we're getting a little closer now to the present day, but in 1995 you stepped down as artistic director for the Toledo Ballet. Was it simply time, Marie, to do that? How difficult was it for you?
Oh, it wasn't difficult after all those years, you know, and I knew that I knew from a good board of directors, and what I felt was going to be a very fine legacy would continue, and it has.
Now, an accomplished dancer and teacher named Nigel Burgoyne was hired in 1996 to take your place, a very talented man. That seemed to work out well for several years, but in 2005 his contract was not renewed, and he left to form his own ballet company. How did that affect you?
Well, I'm very proud of him that he's doing very well with his ballet company, and you know, he's one of my children, as I would say. And his wife, Marie Vogt, was one of my early students, and is a beautiful dancer, and is certainly a wonderful helpmate for him. Yes, we progressed, and eventually, then, through several other trials and tribulations, we have this wonderful duo of Lisa Mayer and her husband, Michael Lang.
Can two ballet companies survive in Toledo?
Can two musical groups survive in Toledo? Yes, absolutely. If they have their own identity. Now the symphony, of course, is numero uno, but there are other musical groups, and there's choral groups, and can they all survive? If they are surviving, they are surviving. Yes.
There's an audience for them. Did you lived in the Lathrop House? Is that right?
Yes, for about 49 years.
That's a house in Sylvania with a lot of history, isn't it?
Well, yes, we were there 49 years, and it has history. And it was people asked me whether I missed my house. I say, no, I miss my home. And there's a difference between a home and a house. The family, of course, and the many friends who came into the home. And I even had classes in dance in the back 4 acres and enjoyed it.
Well, we should point out, of course, that the Lathrop House in Sylvania was an important stop, reportedly, on the Underground Railroad back more than,
Yes, I frequently had people come to the door and ask about the history, and I would give a little talk to them and take them through the basement and so forth, yes.
Yeah. Marie, while preparing for our conversation, I learned all kinds of interesting things about you, including that you have a passion for basketball.
Well,
is that right?
My husband, a Michigan man, of course. We attended all the football games and all the basketball games, and would come home to the Toledo University basketball games, And because of Ted's love for the sport, his school as well as all sports there, I attended his basketball games, and he said, honey, you just have to look at the basketball as ballet. Look how they jump and turn and dunk the ball. And I realized that was true, and I really like basketball very much.
I think you could make the case that a basketball coach is much like a ballet teacher.
Yes, I would think so.
In many ways. Somehow I believe that had there been a girls' basketball team at DeVilbiss High School in the late 1930s, you would have been on it. You probably would have been a star.
I can't imagine that. I don't know. I'm glad for your imagination.
Marie, you've lost a lot of people who were close to you. Your husband, Ted, 1999, I think.
Yes.
Your sister, Joan, your nephew, Jack, your dear friend and associate, Madame Velta.
Yes.
Yet you've remained very strong and resolute. Those are good qualities to have, aren't they? For someone
Well, you
who
wake
lives
up
such
in
a
the
long
morning
life.
and you take it as it comes. That's right.
You've had a wonderful career, Marie, and as we wind down here, I wonder, are there any regrets?
No, I don't think. I'm hoping that there will not be any regrets as I continue. I've had a wonderful life. In addition to the dance and the arts, and certainly my wonderful husband and my good friends, we did quite a bit of traveling, all over the world. And without Ted, I would not have had that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Marie, I know you and your husband Ted traveled all over this world and have many wonderful trips and memories. Can you share some of those experiences with us?
Well, I'll tell you, the trip to the Baltic was very interesting. We landed in Helsinki, Finland, which is a wonderful country and a wonderful city, and went up the inner passage to Leningrad, St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that was a beautiful visit. And then back down past Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia. And that was a wonderful trip on a very small expeditionary ship. Trips to the South America and Central America were always interesting. Jack Callahan and Joyce Jack courted Joyce in South America, in Brazil. And they wanted to revisit the city where they had talked and met each other. And we flew to South America to, I can't think. We stayed at the Tropicana Hotel up along at the Amazon area, and then eventually flew down to Rio. Ed Meese at one time organized a trip to China for lawyers and judges, and Ted and I went on this trip, and it was before Tiananmen Square, and this was not only a hard trip, but a very interesting trip, because we went to Beijing and to Shangzhou, down on the Silk Road area, and Kunming, and we enjoyed that, but it was a very hard trip. But then there was another trip to Japan with John and Vonda Spitzer on their honeymoon. We had gone to San Francisco for a bar convention, and then with John and Vonda, we went on to Japan and lived Japanese style in there, and with the futons on the floor and the various wooden baths, you know. It was a very interesting experience.
Did you get to see ballet?
No, we didn't see the ballet at all. It was artistic experiences of another kind. We went out to see the Emperor's Palace, and I'm afraid I held up the entire bus because I had to see those black swans in the moat that surrounds the palace, you know, those black swans with their red eyes. And but that experience, I was too vain to wear my reading glasses at that time. And however, we enjoyed wonderful Kobe beef, but I'm afraid that I ate the chrysanthemum that decorated the plate and drank the finger bowl, you know. But that was just a fun experience, a wonderful trip.
Been all over the world, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Egypt, up the Nile and down the Nile, whatever it is, and Paris, where our group had dinner one evening coming home from Egypt, and a wonderful little restaurant where my husband was not feeling well, so I joined another member of our group in dinner and ordered the what are the black and white truffles? A truffle salad, and was really surprised to know the next day that the price for the truffle salad was $75 U.S. You know, but that was an experience. Where else would you have a truffle salad?
Exactly.
Yes.
You gotta splurge once in a while.
In Spain and Sicily and Italy, I went with a painting. After Ted died, I was invited to go to Italy with an artist and a group from the Hawaii, the Big Island, to Tuscany and to paint. And I enjoy painting. And we were there at the time of 9/11, and which was a horrible shock to all of us.
You were overseas on 9/11.
Overseas, and we couldn't get back to the United States for quite a while, and finally ended up in England visiting with some friends, the Boyds, in a Cotswold area of outside of London, and eventually were able to catch an airplane home, and that was not only joyous being in Italy and painting, but horrible having the news.
What was the
from
attitude
home.
of Europeans like toward you as Americans at that awful time? How did the people treat you as an American?
Oh, actually, now not only in England, people were coming up and commiserating about the problem, but when I went to Normandy, people actually came up and thanked me as an American for helping their people. So I went to this American cemetery. I had a friend asked me to look up the grave of his nephew, and I did. I had written to the president of the cemetery, who arranged for a little golf cart to take me to the grave and provide me with material from the grave, a rock from the beach at Normandy and sand from the beach and the little flags and all. On the way home, before I could board the plane from Italy, or from France, home, a person at in the airport told me I couldn't take my little flag home. And this upset me so. I spoke some broken French, and evidently what I said was sufficient, and they allowed me to bring the flag home. They thought it would be dangerous that I might poke somebody with it.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Isn't that something?
So that's about as much as I can.
Well, you are sustained by wonderful memories, and Madame Marie Vogt, it's been a wonderful experience, and I wish nothing but good health for you as we move forward. Thanks for your gift of your time today and for all you do for the city of Toledo. And once again, we thank you for your interest in the Sight and Sound Video History Project of the Toledo Lucas County Public Library.